Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more MBTI. Today we're going to be looking into the mind of Harvard Professor Roland Fryer in our quest to get inside the mind of interesting people. This is from the PVD podcast, but before we do, let's look at the system so that we know what we're talking about. You haven't seen MBTI done quite the way that I do it because I have my own set of questions that I ask. There are 5 dichotomous questions, A or B, yes or no. Are you either things or ideas? Are you focused on the things that you can actually put your hands on? Are you focused on the here and now, the sensory, the experience from now into the past? Or are you about the ideas and the concepts and from here into the future? Between those two, do you either gather the new ones or sort through the old ones? Do you constantly seek the new addition, or are you constantly refining what everybody else has found into the best one? Do you do that for yourself, or do you do that for the tribe? Doing it for yourself does not mean selfish. It means that you use it first, and then you give it to other people. Are you rigid or flexible in how you do that? Do you say that my way is the way, or do you say, hey, let's work around these people and their ideas or their things? Are you rigid or are you flexible? And are you direct or informative? Means, do you give the whole answer and then stop, or do you give the whole answer 2 or 3 times? And do you chase rabbit holes? Do you go looking for more information to give? These things put together will give us one of these types, and we can figure out somewhat of how the mind works. This is not a medical diagnosis. I'm not trying to say that there is any type of disorder or disease attached to any type of anything that I'm doing here. It's merely a way to find examples in someone else of things that we identify within ourselves, so that we can identify within ourselves which one of these types we are, so that we can work on fixing ourselves. With all of that being said, we're going to dive into the PVD podcast. Now, normally I go a little bit farther along, but Dr. Professor, I'm not sure how to address him, but Mr. Fryer here, it's probably doctor, but I'm not sure, so it's not in the title. And so we're going to assume Dr. Fryer is fairly comfortable in this interview. He's not feeling antagonized. He's not defensive. And so I expect him to be quite comfortable, and he's already given us clues as to what we should be looking for. So again, we're looking for things, ideas, new, old, self-tribe, rigid, flexible, direct, informative. Let's go.
What do you
That was not right.
Because, sometimes everybody's seeking something else. Like for me, I have a certain life that I've lived, and I'm trying to get to the bottom of a certain truth for myself, that to maybe tie a certain issue in the past, conflicts that I was trying to overcome. What answer are you trying to get to the bottom of for yourself?
I'm going to put every ounce of effort I have in trying to make sure that kids, black or brown, don't have to endure what I did to get here.
That's a tribe focus.
I'm trying to make the journey worth it, right? So if you'd come to me at age, 15, it's one of the loneliest days of my entire life. I walked out of the Denton County Correctional Facility. I just visited my father in there. And I remember that conversation because he was bragging about how comfy the slippers were that they gave the people in jail. I thought
that's a things focus, right?
It's like the dumbest shit I've ever heard. I walked out of there and I looked up, and I'll never forget it. It was one of these beautiful blue.
Like, he's remembering the past. He's got the details, and the sensory is involved. So that's things.
Texas skies.
Now, it started off with an idea, right? I want black and brown kids to feel comfortable. So that's an idea, and he's using these things probably to support that idea, but that was a lot of things.
And I've never felt more alone in my life. I was 15 years old. Where was I going to go? There was no one else. I didn't even know who my mother was at that time. My grandmother was here in Florida. And if you'd come to me at that time and you'd said, look, I know things seem pretty impossible now, but these experiences are going to make you impervious to the BS when it comes to race in America, and you are going to be able to analyze data and maybe make some progress for the next generation of kids.
make progress for the next generation of kids, right? Now, he's telling his story, but that is a kickback to the tribe. I wasn't trying to put self on him as he's telling his story coming up as his childhood. But the motivation here seems to be tribe, right? I'm doing this for the others as opposed to I'm doing it for myself. That doesn't mean that you don't get to benefit from it. It means that your primary focus is someone else.
I'd like to think that I would.
And that's whoever you consider your tribe. Your tribe does not have to be everyone. It is most likely your family. It is most likely your business associates. It is the people that you choose to be in your life. That is your tribe.
Taking on that challenge. But if you'd come to me during that day and said, if you can get through this, we can have Chardonnay at 10:30 at Harvard University to hang out. We can talk about Plato. I would have said, no, thanks, man. Can you just get my dad out of jail? And so for me, it's you're right. I mean, when I first got to Harvard, I felt guilty. I had to figure out, I got to do something, right? And I feel like the clock is running out. So I'm in a big hurry to make a big difference.
Were you, in Armenian, there's a phrase that I couldn't stand they would say to us, because of where we were at. Mechka, Mechka, Mechka. Like, oh, poor Patrick, poor Ben Davids. And I couldn't stand that phrase. When you went to Harvard, did they treat you like, hey, you came from here and poor you, let us treat you this? Or were you treated like anybody else and, the standards and expectation to perform? And if yes or no, did it do anything to you?
It's interesting. I don't know if anyone said poor me, but I do believe they looked at me different. I felt like they looked at me like I was an exception.
So that's a feeling, right? That's trying to understand what other people were thinking. That's not a my way or is the only way. That is I understand where you're coming from. So that's a little bit more flexible.
Someone had beat the odds. Someone who was curious.
The exception, someone who beat the odds and curious, right? They're ideas, but they're being used as examples of things.
The New York Times did a profile of my life in 2006 or so. I remember, colleagues coming up to me and go, man, you sure you want all that in the newspaper? Because they talked about my family, dealing drugs and blah, blah, blah. That I wasn't trying to hide anything at that point. But the idea that I was an exception used to really piss me off, yeah.
That's some tribes right there too, right?
Because
like even the idea of they thought this is driven by him being tribe focused, right? So he's assuming their intentions. Now, I'm not getting into right or wrong about that. He's assuming their intentions because I'm assuming that he didn't ask, right? He is putting on them these thoughts. And he may be completely justified in that, but it is still an assumption. So he is assuming this thing about these people is the flexible part, that is trying to understand what they're doing. He's using these ideas, but these ideas are more of a concrete this thing, right? And so it's not about bringing in new ideas. It is about these ideas as examples of something that happened. That's given me a things for, like he's using a lot of things and we haven't seen a whole lot of ideas. We've gotten this idea, right? And then a whole lot of things, like ideas as things, but still things.
But the idea that I was an exception used to really piss me off.
But that box right there, that's another one of the one boxes, right? I'm here for the black and the brown people, and these people are thinking that I am the exception. That's two boxes that are closely correlated together. They're not necessarily the same box, but they are both one box, right? One idea. As opposed to a couple of ideas, it's one idea.
Yeah, because this is not about helping a few of us beat the odds, right? That's insulting. This is about unfettered competition so we can change the odds. Right? This is about figuring out how we give people real opportunities so that they can do for themselves. Right? I don't need you to pluck a few of us and pat us on the back. What we need to do is figure out how do we find hidden talent wherever it lies across the globe.
I'm working on that. That's a little presumptuous to say, but I am. Like, that's one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing, so we can get a better look at minds and understand not everybody thinks the same way. Not everybody's going to learn the same way. Not everybody's going to hear the same way. Everybody gets a little bit of something different out of the same conversation. That's the whole point of what I'm doing here. And we need to quit acting like there's a unibox, like everybody fits into the same box because their skin tone happens to be the same. That is a ridiculous argument. It is absolutely ridiculous to think that everybody with the same coloration is facing the same struggles. That is not, it's not a thing. It's not even something that should be assumed about anyone. You don't know anyone's situation without actually talking to them about it. And so, yeah. I want everybody to be the same. I want us all to get past this unnecessary block that we have. I recognize everybody as God's child, and I may not like you, but I love you because you are God's child. Every single one of you.
Interesting. So let's go back to.
But what are we getting from him, right? Let's look at our things. So far, we've gotten a couple of ideas, right? The one box, and we've gotten several examples of many things. It seems like the one idea may be subsidiary to the many things, right? He is seeing all of these examples of these things, and that is causing the action. So it seems to be more things driven than ideas driven. He is using the idea in support of the thing. He seems to be doing new and things. He seems to be tribe oriented. We have gotten several kickbacks to the greater benefit of the tribe. To like, this is about him. So there are I statements, but he has taken several opportunities to kick it back to the tribe. So I'm leaning towards tribe and flexibility because we've seen several examples of that too. He seems to be rather direct. He is giving us the story. It's the whole story. It even has some words to it. It's not necessarily truncated, but it is not explaining the same thing 2 or 3 times, and it is not chasing off on rabbit holes. The examples are relevant to what he is talking about, and they don't chase a rabbit hole. So it appears that we are looking at things, new, tribe, flexible, and direct. Let's look a little bit longer before we do the official, and then we'll do some confirmation afterwards.
A study, and you've shared a little bit about your background for some folks who don't know. The study that you did, this specific study in 2016 that we played a clip for earlier. When you're going through this process with this study, were you yourself expecting those numbers, or were you yourself like surprised as hell when you saw it? And then how did that change your perception and opinion of things?
No one was more surprised than me, right? Like, I'm not proud of it, but I don't really like the police that much, right? Like, if I'm going to the airport after this, if they pull me over, I'm gonna be nervous, man. Like, I think a lot of us would be. So I figured this was gonna be the easiest thing in the world, right? People were out protesting and stuff like that after Michael Brown. But, flying to St. Louis and locking arms was just not my thing. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done, it's just not my thing. So I thought, here's what I'll do. To help, I will figure out empirically what's really going on, because we'd only seen a few videos at that point. And I remember going to
we had only gotten a little bit of evidence, right? There's only a few videos is things focused. I've only seen a couple of things. So what I'm going to do is prove the thing, right? I'm going to get the evidence. I'm going to go and get all the things to prove the idea. This seems, again, to be things focused, gather things focused, seems to be flexible around the tribe, right? And tribe centered. So I'm going to try and look specifically for direct informative, because I haven't really been paying that much attention to it, trying to focus between the things and the ideas. But it does seem to be things focused. It does seem to be the actual material things that you can actually talk about, right? Evidence, studies, those are ideas. But they're ideas in physical form, right? You can speculate about things, that is, the ideas, and then once you do the experiment, whatever you speculated about becomes a thing. And so this seems to be gather the things focused.
A colleague of mine saying, here, I'm going to study the police, and here's an idea. And what he quickly told me was, you don't understand anything about the police, so how are you going to figure
Your one box is not quite right.
out what's going on with race and policing in America? So I embedded myself in police departments, and we can talk about that if you want at some point. But I was extremely surprised. I was sure that there was going to be bias in police shootings. As the clip said, when I got the results back, I hired new research assistants to do it over again.
Again, very things focused and a tribe pushback, right? The tribe must have got that wrong. Let's get a new tribe.
Just to make sure. But once you have the results, once you have what you think is the truth, given your data, there's no other choice but to go out with it.
Once you have the things, then you have no flexibility left.
And try to educate people on what the data actually says.
And what is the data? If you can just actually give us the data, what was in the data?
What we found was that on lower level uses of force, so when it comes to pushing someone up against a car, pulling a gun, putting handcuffs on them but not arresting them, things like that, there were large racial differences in police use of force. So black civilians are 50% more likely to have force used on them in any given interaction. Even when the police say they're perfectly compliant and they're not arrested and there's no contraband, etc.
Again, things, tribe. Like, we're getting new things. This is new evidence coming in, right?
Still,
several examples of new evidence.
More than 20% more likely than white civilians to have force used on them. But when it came to lethal use of force, shootings, we found absolutely no racial bias in that in any way, shape, or form. And our data, I believe, is a lot better than what has been discussed in the popular press, because they're looking at kind of statistical snapshots. They're saying, well, the fraction of black people who are shot by the police is 50%, and they're only 13% of the population, ergo it must be discrimination. Sorry, I don't know if they forgot Statistics 101. That's not how it works, right? What we did was say, look, here is two people are in a situation with police. Their behavior is the same. The other conditions on the ground are the same. The police decides to shoot one and not the other. Is race a factor? In other words, accounting for everything else about that situation, does race predict whether or not a police officer will pull the trigger? And the answer emphatically is no. And that is the result that caused panic in a lot of people. Most people like the first result.
What did it do to you?
Okay, so again, that seems to be direct, right? It was long. That was a really long explanation. And it even had two examples in it. But both of the examples were short, to the point, brought it back to the point in order to continue along the same point without chasing a rabbit hole, right? He could have went off down a rabbit hole. That was borderline informative, but because the fact that they were both cut short and they were both relevant to the point, and that the point was not a reiteration 3 times, right? We did get it twice, but it was a statement of fact in the beginning, an example, explanation, example, wrap up of the same thing. And so that again seems to be fairly direct. So we're going to go ahead and do the type and get this ready to go. So what we're looking at seems to be things, right? He seems to be in the left-hand 2 columns. He seems to be gather new, which is going to put us all the way to the left. He seems to be tribe focused. That's going to give us the bottom 2 rows. He seems to be flexible. That's going to give us the very bottom row. And so that's going to be an ESFP. And if I have 1 second to find my ESFP here, we will talk about the last determining factor. And the last determining factor is the direct or informative, right? He seems to be rather direct. That means that he is keeping the information for himself. That's going to put him on the right-hand side of the screen, because the 3rd slot is how you give the information back. And are you being introverted with it and holding it for yourself and being direct, Or are you being extroverted with it and offering all of it very freely without stopping? It appears to be more direct than it appears to be informative. It's a fine line to walk between the two, and it is a lot of it comes down to just making a judgment about the content. So we're going to look at it as though he's an alternate, though, because he seems to be direct, right? He is giving the full story, but not over-explaining the story. That's going to put him with a divine SE. SE is about the experience. It is the part that actually wants to get the things done. So he, without even thinking about it, is going to figure out the way to get the things done. He's going to do that through his morals, because he is FI responsible, and he feels responsible for how he feels and his morals. He wants to stand in the correct moral spot. The third eye is where you look forward, and it is where you get defensive. So for him, that is going to be the NI, which is narrowing down the possibilities. That is the best possibility going forward. It is this box. We've seen a couple times where he assumed that he had the right box, and he didn't, right? He got defensive over the box at first. He sent a whole new group of people out to make sure that the box was actually wrong, because he was defensive about it. He is defensive about it because of what everyone thinks, right? The TE throat is what you misunderstand and misrepresent, what you misspeak and mistalk, and it's not intentional, but it's just a misunderstanding of the energy, right? You're getting a lot of information at the top, and you get a lot of positive information at the top and a lot of negative information at the bottom. And the two slots in the middle, the throat and the heart, get the least amount of information if it's not intentional. And so you tend to miss things here. You tend to misunderstand what the people are thinking, and you tend to misstate what the people are thinking. The heart, however, is what you really want to do. You don't get a lot of energy here. You have to intentionally feed this. But if you do, and you start doing it, your life is happy. You are where you want to be. And for him, that is going to be the SI. That is going to be organization and making sure that this is actually the correct thing. That's what he was doing with the study. He went in it with the idea. He gathered all of the evidence and then narrowed it down into the SI. And it was wrong. Or what he had as his NI was wrong. He corrected himself, right? He got defensive. He reran the study, and then he accepted, because I can't help but do that now. That's the solar plexus here. The solar plexus feeds the heart. It is what you need in order to do what you actually want to do. And for him, that is having the ethics correctly aligned. Going to tend to misdo that, to get it wrong, because it is low in the stack, and the negative energy is stronger in the lower part of the stack. But if you take the time and to actually make sure that you have the actual FE correct, the actual what does everyone else feel, what are the actual ethics in the situation, if you can get those correct, it will feed the correct thing. The study he came out with was the correct thing. It proved this thing, even though it disproved his one box. The study proved something different. He changed the box. Now he'll be defensive over that box. The last two, the sacral is the trickster energy. It is the sexual energy. It is where you intentionally choose the wrong thing. Nobody ever says, hey, I want to do the wrong thing. But this is where you do that. You accidentally overlook the ideas, right? There are more ideas out there. The one you have is not necessarily the only one there is. And you have a tendency here to overlook that, to not see that. It's not on purpose. You just tend to be a little bit dismissive about it. You're defensive over your one, you dismiss theirs. Start taking those in. Get more feedback. The main reason that you have a problem with that, however, is because of your base. Your base is where you just get everything wrong. Like 90% of what you get from the base, without correcting it, is going to be wrong. And so here, that's going to be logic checks. That is going to be, is this logically consistent? Is this logically, factually true? You can see the example where he held the one box and it was proven to not be true. That's not to discount the parts that he found to be true, but the one idea driving the thing behind it wasn't true, right? And so he changed the box to something that was true. His logic for selecting the first box was wrong. It took the reinforcing of all the evidence to make him change that box and to reconsider his TI. This seems to be a fairly good fit. That doesn't mean that it is the only fit possible. It's just the way that I'm interpreting what I'm seeing from a very short clip of an interview, right? This is not to say that I know the man's inner workings of his mind. I've never sat down and held a conversation with him. We're looking for things that we identify with so we can find things in ourselves. If you identify with the ESFP and you would like to learn how to integrate that into yourself and how to get a little bit stronger coming up your stack, the video is up here. It is the ESFP video because it is important to know how to do these things. And if you'd like to learn the greater system and how to do these things, I have that also. It is the Infinite Integrations playlist. And it tells you in great detail about this type and how to take these things and integrate them into yourself. We're going to look now for some confirmations. We're going to click back over and we're going to watch a little bit more of the interview. And we're going to see if we can see the actual things, right? We can see if he is actually gathering the things. We've seen several examples of that, but we're going to double check it. We're going to look for his morals guiding him and him being responsible for passing that on to other people. I think we've seen a couple of examples. We'll probably see some more. We're going to look to see if he's getting defensive about the one idea. He's got a new one idea now. There doesn't have to be only one idea. You can have a couple. You're not going to have 15, but you probably have 2 or 3 things that you shove every idea into one of these 3 boxes. We're going to look and see if he is misunderstanding what people think. We're going to see if his base logic checks are a little bit whatever. That's a little bit harder to do, right? He's not going to be actively logic checking anything now. But if the logic doesn't quite consistently add up, that'll be a good indicator for that. And then we're going to look at the sacral to see if he is missing some ideas. So let's dig back in just for a few more minutes to see if we can get some confirmations of these things. Let's go.
You, what did it do to you? I mean, because there's certain, you're seeking the truth, because that's what you keep saying with Very Wise, right? I'm trying to get to a truth. And I love what you said, and you said it again earlier.
Truth would be a box.
Today you said, in one of...
It's a very big box, right? Putting everything into the truth box is a big box. It's probably a box inside of the truth box.
The documentaries I watched, I think it was like 26, 27 minutes, where it says, I'm not trying to beat the odds. Because one guy, what does it feel like, Roland, that you beat the odds? You're like, I'm not trying to beat the odds. I'm trying to change the odds, right? But individually, we're also going through a journey. There's a difference between saying, guys, look what I found. You will not believe this report. Look at what I found. But what am I going through? Yeah. What are you going through with the life that you live?
At that time, I was not aware of what was going to come. So
I had no idea what the tribe was going to think about this.
When we had the results, we pursued 2 tracks. One, you obviously publish it, and we published it on a top economics journal. Great. 7 people read it. Maybe 6. The second path is we wanted a more popular version of the article, so the New York Times wrote about it. And for me personally, when people respond, you know, people send me an email and say, hey, your paper's crap, or hey, your paper's great, I do all I can to return every single one of those. And so for me, I sat for days and returned thousands and thousands of emails from regular old Americans in Kansas and in Idaho and in Chicago.
That's several examples of things, right? People as things, but things.
Who said, I don't know if I believe this or not, but thank goodness there's actually data and we can actually have a debate about it. And we went back and forth. And that's kind of what I do for a living, right? I'm a professor. I'm supposed to be teaching, not just in the classroom. But if you release a paper like this is what you do. So what happened to me? I got a chance to teach. And if you
and that's what you're supposed to do. Why does they keep doing that? That's what you're supposed to do is a moral check, right? That is I believe that this is what you're supposed to do. That's just what I pointed out there. That's a responsibility to correct the morals, right? By being the example of the morals, it doesn't matter that this study didn't come out the way that I like. I'm going to stand in my morals and do the right thing.
remember that
Not everybody does that.
time. I didn't do any other press. This wasn't about me out there thumping my chest trying to be on whatever news
Wasn't about me. It was about the tribe,
channel.
which I misunderstood like what they thought, what they were going to think about it. I really expected something different.
Saying, hey, look what I found. We put it out there, and then I, over email and other means, tried to communicate directly with people about what the results were about.
Well, what I'm asking is, what did it do to you? So because life, okay, I grew up in Iran, and I see
Like, he threw it off of him.
10,000.
He threw it back to the tribe quite significantly there, right? Like, it was a question directly about him and how he felt about it, and he put it back on the tribe.
Men marching,
That's not an intentional thing,
flatulating their backs,
and it's not a bad thing.
screaming "Mad Bad Omri" called "Death Upon America." America must be an evil empire. Then I watched Rocky 4, and Rocky and Drago are fighting. Drago, 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 and then Rocky, Rocky. And if you can change, he can change. Anybody can change. I'm like, man, maybe we can bring Soviet Union and us and unify and realize we have a lot in common, right? And I'm like, wait a minute. But that's a movie. That's fake. This is real. America must be evil. Then you go to Germany, live at a refugee camp. Parents get a divorce. Mom says, because that entire family were communists, their Bible was Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto. Rich people are greedy. Dad, on the other side, is an imperialist. They believe poor people are lazy. And then I get into the military. I get into sales. And then I see the person that bitches the most, work the least, the guy. I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on? And it changed my opinion about economy, about work, about politics, about capitalism, about who to vote for, about who not to vote for, about who's manipulating, about who wanted
I've already done a type on Pat if you were interested in seeing him confirm himself.
to use me, about who wanted to keep me poor, about who wanted to kind of make sure I didn't figure out the secrets to life, that I can go out there and figure myself out, about how they use fear to control, to keep your mouth shut, all of these things that I'm going through as a kid, right? And I'm like in my 20s, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. What did you go through one-on-one, not anybody else? Did it change anything away from what you witnessed in your life to go back and say, man, I remember Bobby back in high school. Unfortunately, they sold him. He bought it. He's dead now. He was smarter than me in math. If he knew what I knew, he could have been. That sucks. So it was really the social, economic. It wasn't a skin color, but he was convinced it was a skin color. Why do we buy? Did you go through that evolution yourself?
Of course. Yeah, of course, of course. On a couple dimensions. One, I was
That was a great question.
disappointed in social scientists.
I was disappointed in the tribe. I did not understand what they thought.
I didn't realize there was so much politics in academia
Again, I did not get it. Right?
until that point.
But that is scratching the very surface. Racial politics is the very surface of what is obfuscated in our college systems.
I really thought that we were out there, all of us, searching for the truth. I mean, we
I had this box.
sit in these seminars and we beat the crap out of each other's ideas and papers, and it's all about trying to get to a place of what's correct and what's not. And to see
It should be.
people who I respected for years
Tribe.
lose their way because there was a result they didn't like. It was very shocking to me.
That's a morals, right? That is a moral responsibility. Being shocked that someone else is not standing in their own beliefs or being corrected in their beliefs is a moral thing. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up because I'm not trying to just take all of Pat's interview here. I think that this was a fairly good representation. It seems like it fits fairly well. I'm not trying to say that this is an absolute medical diagnosis. It seems to be a way that we can get a grip on how thought works and how we communicate that thought back. That's the point of the system. It's not to be special. It's not to be some magical snowflake. It is to understand I see these things first. And then I get defensive over this. And so maybe when I feel myself getting defensive over this thing, right? for him, the defense is the one idea, right? And when I feel that, then maybe I need to look at that a little bit closer. He did that, right? That's what this is. He was checking his defensives. He was defensive about the one idea. He gathered the evidence. He checked it against the morals. He even brought up the bottom part of his stack and did that correctly. And so this is a good example. It seems to be a good fit. It seems to be something that we can learn from. If you identify with him, like I said, I do have a video for this type, and it is how to start strengthening your TI base so that you can start logic checking things and making sure that you know to pay attention to the NE so that you have all the ideas. This was a really good interview. I highly encourage you to go back and check out the rest of it. The link is provided down below. I will be watching it, but we're not going to watch it together because we are not here just to take Pat's content. We're looking for examples of other people so that we can find ourselves and start building ourselves on a framework so that we can have our own morals in mind and that we can correct the tribe's ethics in the correct manner so that we can get our logic checks right and make sure that we're getting all the information. The more people who are emotionally sound and able to do this type of thing, the better off we all are. And it doesn't matter what skin tone you are. If you're checking yourself, that's the important part. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat complicated topic. I understand that it is a little bit different than what you're used to seeing. If you're used to MBTI, you're like, what even is this right now? It's a little bit different, but that's for a reason. The old stuff didn't work. I had to change my box. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you were here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, wholly, and complete, just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt's Take. Peace.